Hi Fabio, how are you?
I am good. How about yourself?
Fine, fine, thanks. We just have a conversation about Italian history of food, of tradition in food, and make some comparison with Korea and Asian cuisine. Can you tell me something about you? You stay at the New York University, but you have a very, very long and really interesting bio. So can
Hmm?
you summarize it?
Sure. So right now I'm a professor of food studies at New York University. I am also an author. I've published several books. One of them about the history of food in Italy has been actually translated into Korean.
Oh,
Um,
in
yes,
Korean too.
yes. And my most recent book is Gastronativism, Food Identity, and Politics. I am also a journalist, so I write for magazines and newspapers. Most recently, I've written for Foreign Affairs magazine.
Wonderful. But you have personal experiences in Asia many times, I
Yes,
think. Yes, can
yes,
you tell me
sure.
something?
My first degree was in Asian cultures and languages. So I spent 2 years in Beijing at Beijing University and some time in Japan. And I've traveled to the area often. And I speak Chinese and Japanese, which helps quite a bit when traveling.
It's very rare to find someone that is able to read and to speak Japanese and Chinese both, and English. Of course, you are Italian, so your native language is Italian.
Yes.
Um, Very, very good. Can you explain to Asian audience, Korean, South Korean audience, what is the Italian food, food and identity you said before.
Mhm.
I think that the food is it's a deep a deep connection with identity, social, cultural identity. It's the matter of your studies. So
Yes.
can you describe in some way the Italian identity through the food, through the
Mhm.
food traditions?
So, first of all, Italian food now is popular all around the world and also in Korea. South Korea, there are tons of Italian restaurants. Many young South Koreans come to Italy to train in Italian restaurants or to go to school in Italian cooking schools. So it's quite likely that most South Koreans have an idea of what Italian food is, but they might not be maybe too familiar with the fact that Italian food is really tightly connected with local identities. So the food from my city, Rome, might not be the same as the food in Naples or as the food in Palermo or as the food in Florence. This is because Italy had a long history where it didn't exist as a country. Actually, Italy, as we know it, became a country in 1861. Before of that, it was a collection of countries, states, some of them independent, some of them under foreign control. So this has caused for the food to be really localized. Also, because of the lack of good transportation until recently, people would cook what they had around them. And this also increased the local characteristics of food. Overall, Italians do identify with Italian food in general, but most of all with the food of the place where they were born and grew up. In some ways, Italian food as a national food, it's something recent because before there was no nation. So the first real cookbook that addresses Italian food was published in 1891, and it was written by Pellegrino Artusi. Since then, the idea of a national food developed, and now there are a set of dishes, ingredients, traditions, techniques that most Italian would recognize as their own, as Italian and not just local.
Yeah, you are talking about the entire Italy history because it's a history of cities. The history of Italy is, for the most part of his history, is a history of municipality, conflicts sometimes among municipalities. We have the municipality of Florence, the most famous, maybe the municipality of Pavia, small cities too, and of course, after the end of Roman Empire, you have a lot of typical foods, a lot of way to cook everything, but there are some, I think, common lines and big differences. Just to quote one, it's between rice and pasta, or between beer and wine, or I don't know. Can you explain some big differences? Because when we talk about a specific city, we say we have in a very particular differences that it's impossible to synthesize briefly. But some differences are bigger. Wine and beer, pasta and rice. Maybe you know very well. Sure, you know very well these differences. So, can you tell us something about this?
I would start with the fact that Italian meals are organized in courses. So at least there is a primo, a first course, that tend to be a staple, either a pasta or rice or polenta or soup, depending on the areas. For instance, rice was very popular in the north of Italy. It only became a national consumption after the 1920s, 1930s, while pasta was developed in the south first, but then over time became a national dish. Of course, we have to distinguish between dried pasta, which is more popular in the south, and fresh pasta that at times also includes eggs, which is more common in the north. And also the other important staple in the Northeast is polenta. Basically, it's cornmeal, ground corn cooked in water. And that was the main meal for many people in the past. Another important element that makes Italian cuisine unique in a way is the connection with fresh ingredients. I mean, this is common with other cuisine, but in a way, ingredients like tomatoes and peppers and zucchini and eggplants and lots of vegetables become quite important. This is a characteristic also shared with other countries in the Mediterranean. So we can say that Italian cuisine is a reflection of the Mediterranean diet, which means high consumption of grains and vegetables, consumption of seafood of all kinds, and limited consumption of meat and dairy, although we have a fantastic production of cheese. Everybody knows cheeses like Parmigiano Reggiano, for instance. As for drinks, Probably the most popular drink all over the country is wine, and Italy has a very long history of wine production, starting with the ancient Romans. But there is also production of beer, and now Italian artisanal craft beer is becoming more and more popular with the younger generations.
There is a new trend in wine. It's some light sparkling wine like spumante, like Cartize, and this is really new. It's very common in the young generations to use this just for aperitivo. Can you explain something that it's very, I think, very specific of Italian tradition, Italian food, especially nowadays, and it's the
Yeah.
aperitivo. What is the meaning? What is the ingredients? What is the ritual of aperitivo?
Well, aperitivo, it's sort of a pre-dinner light meal that it's most often actually it needs to be accompanied by some drink, usually an alcoholic drink. It can be a mixed drink, it can be a glass of wine, but very, very popular, as you were mentioning now, sparkling wines are becoming the core of the aperitivo. So you have a glass of something and little bites, little appetizers in a way, finger food that prepares you in a way for the dinner. It is a very social institution, a very social custom. So you don't usually go out by yourself to have aperitivo. You go out with your friends. You chat, you drink, you eat a little bit, and then sometimes you move on to dinner, where you have your normal meal. The aperitivo, it's a relatively new tradition. It became popular from the 1970s, but now it's become a real institution. So most bars and cafes in Italy would have an aperitivo menu. So for, let's say, 10 euros, you would have a drink and something to eat with it.
Maybe I have in mind this strange division. The aperitivo, you said, is something that is before the dinner, and we have maybe, tell me if I right or wrong, two kind of people, two style of life, and some people take the aperitivo and then he close the entire experience on food for the evening. The other part of people, Italian people, especially Italian people, they take the aperitivo just before the dinner. So after the aperitivo, you follow with the dinner. You too have the same sensation, the same vision about this division between.
Well, I think it mostly depends on how substantial the aperitivo is.
Yes,
and now
of
we have a
course.
new emerging word, apericena, which means
Yes.
it's an aperitivo so substantial that actually you don't need to have dinner. So
Yeah.
there is a spectrum of aperitivo, meaning it can be just, I don't know, some chips and a glass into something much more substantial with interesting, creative finger food. And in those occasions, you might eat so much that you do not need to go to dinner. So I think it depends on the situation, on also the weather, because in summer maybe you tend to eat less. So probably you would tend to have a substantial aperitivo without a dinner. But I think it becomes on the context, on the seasons, and on the people
Yeah.
involved.
Before you said that there is an order in Italian dinner. of course, because the lunch is very variable. So you can say there is a structured meal. And in the dinner, you said before we have antipasto, something just to create the right atmosphere for the following dishes. And then you have the primo. The primo, generally speaking, is a pasta or rice or something creation based on one of this. Then we have the second, we say the second just in chronological way, following the first one. What is the second, the features of the second, or secondo in Italian? Secondo.
Yeah, the secondo would be the second course, and usually it's centered around some sort of protein. Can be some meat, it can be some fish, with sides that tend to be vegetables. So there is all tradition of secondi. Of course, now as more and more people are moving to a plant-based or a vegetarian diet, more people are just limiting their second course to vegetables. But still, I would say that meat and fish still maintain the center of this second course. So yes, as you were mentioning, Italian meals tend to be stretched over time with different phases, which make it a little different from other cuisines, where maybe you have an appetizer, an entree, and a dessert. For us, it's a little more articulated. It's a little more complex. And food doesn't arrive to the table at the same time, but it arrives in waves, both at home and in restaurants.
Yes, in some way we have in the traditional dinner. I don't know if nowadays it's the same, but we have the antipasto, the primo, the second course, and then we have a side course. A vegetable, generally speaking, is a vegetable for the second, and then we have dessert, coffee, and so on. But just to mention your ideas about the connection between food and identity, okay, sorry for the stop, a temporary stop. Did you hear me
No.
now?
Yes, now I hear
Yes.
you.
Okay, thank you. You said that there is a connection between identity, social life, social style of life, and the food, the dinner, especially the dinner. Can we say that there is a relation between the kind of primo, secondo of the dish and the impact of your taste? I'll be more clearly. With antipasto, you create you in an expectation. Is something with maybe with the pepper, with something that is its function is to wait for something more delicious, like pasta, and then to have a full satisfaction with the second. That is very, very solid dish. And then you have some, I can say, indulge yourself with the dessert. Is it my reconstruction of linkages between tastes and the psychological ways to understand the courses, or I'm completely wrong?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that because I mean, some primo can be scrumptious. Think about a very rich tortellini, which is
Yes, of course.
stuffed fresh pasta with, I don't know, in a broth. And there are ways of making even an appetizer extremely indulgent. So I think it depends on the style of the host when you're at home, but also on what you're looking for when you go out to a restaurant. Do you want to have something light or you want to go over the top? So you can have choices for that, I think, in all the courses of the meal.
Yeah. Can you describe 3, 4 typical Italian dishes if you have to suggest to Korean people that decide to visit Rome? Rome, yes, be specific in Rome. What
Mhm.
is your suggestion? 1, 2, 3 dishes that you recipes that
Yeah.
you think they are the real expression of a city like Rome?
So, for instance, in Rome, we have a series of pasta dishes that have become quite identified with Roman food culture. And among those, I would mention pasta amatriciana, which is made with sauce and in which you also have bits of guanciale, which is cured pork jowl. It's a very traditional Roman ingredient. You can use guanciale also to make another kind of pasta called gricia, which is just simply pasta with no tomato sauce, the bits of the pork jowl and cheese. Another extremely popular pasta, and now it's becoming very popular also here in the US, is cacio e pepe, which means cheese and pepper. Very simple, pasta with pecorino cheese, which is sheep milk cheese, and pepper. That's it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's not an easy dish because to get that cream, that texture, you have to know what you're doing. And I think the fourth very famous Roman pasta is carbonara, which has guanciale also and eggs. The history of carbonara, it's very debated. Probably it became popular in the 50s, but we have also some mentions of the dish before that. When it comes to other dishes, I would mention, for instance, artichokes uh, in two ways. We call it the Roman style and the Jewish style. Keep in mind that traditional Jewish cuisine has had a huge impact on the development of Roman food. So, in the Roman style, they are braised with garlic and other herbs and wine. In the Jewish style, they are deep fried until they become all opened up and crunchy. And those are extremely popular dishes. As for meats, maybe lamb. It's one of the most traditional meats. So roasted lamb, it's quite popular. And also the offal of the lamb can be eaten, very often paired with artichokes. So this maybe are some of the most characteristic Roman dishes.
Yes, I think about the debate that uh, you said before about the cacio and pepe. It's very simple. You said that it's very, very simple. But there is a long, long debate about how to um, use the cacio, the cheese, in which moment is perfect. how many time it needs to be cooked and so on. This is a very strange, not strange, it's very, I don't know, curious, because generally speaking, we have a recipe is really structured for, I don't know, in French cuisine, in French, in French recipes, in French books. In Rome, even the most simple dish, it's full of opinions, opposite opinions sometimes. What is your interpretation of this really curious situation?
So I think it's since these dishes have become so symbolic of Roman food culture, they're almost expression of identities. There are big discussions about which is the true recipe. So for instance, for the amatriciana that I was mentioning before, the big discussion is with or without onion. And so on. I think it's a question of having picked a few traditional recipes and having given them such an important symbolic role to identify Roman cuisine that somehow making sure that you're making the most authentic version becomes quite important. Hence the discussions also among people that don't even cook, but have very clear ideas about what the dish should be like.
My interpretation is that it depends by the history, because the Italian food, Italian cuisine, it's from the bottom, from families. It's not by the king, the court, the professional cooker. Everyone feel himself or herself free to interpret, to create something new, or just to come back to all the oldest way, or supposed oldest way to cook something. I think it's something very popular and very social, because the cuisine is not a professional one. Okay, we have a lot of wonderful cooker that made a great job in the cuisine, but the deep conviction of everyone in Italy is that my food is better than anyone, and I'm not professional. This is something very common. Do you agree?
I mean, I think that happens all over the world. It's not only Italy.
Yeah.
In Korea, it happens the same. I have many Korean friends, and they have the same discussion, maybe about the best version of bulgogi or bibimbap. So when everybody cooks, of course, they have their preferences, their home traditions, their taste. But then again, the issue is when a dish become a cultural symbol, I think, and that changes completely the game.
Yeah. And just let us introduce the, I don't know, connection, maybe some symbols, I don't know what, between Korean cuisine and Roman and Italian cuisine. Did you see in your experience, or do you know if there is something very close or very different in ingredients, in the way to cook, in specific dishes between South Korea and Rome?
I think there are huge differences, and I think that makes Roman food interest for South Korean and South Korean food interesting for Italians. The flavor profiles are quite different the prevalence of gochujang in Korean cuisine, or soy sauces, or kimchi. It's something that for Italian is quite different. For Koreans, I think pasta dishes can be quite familiar because they're also a tradition of different kind of noodles, but maybe the sauces and the condiments can be quite different. There's also the fact that, for instance, when it comes to the second course in meals, we tend to eat, whole big pieces of meat, while in a Korean meal, the meat might come, in thin slices, marinated before the meal. So also the way in which you approach the table is different. I mean, we need a knife. In most Korean dishes, you're fine with chopsticks and a spoon. So I think that there are big differences. Maybe the commonalities is the preference for very fresh food.
Yeah.
Both Koreans and Italians are very careful about the ingredients, are very careful about seasonality, what you should eat in the right season. And so maybe that creates a bridge in a way between the two cultures.
Yes. What is the recipes that you think can create this bridge?
I think maybe I cannot hear you. I don't hear you.
Senti?
Adesso sì,
Ah, perfetto, scusami.
ma non ti vedo.
Mi vedi adesso? Mi vedi adesso? Adesso mi vedi?
No,
Esco e ritorno.
ok.
Mi vedi adesso? Mi
Adesso
vedi?
sì,
Senti
sì,
anche? Va bene,
sì.
facciamo l'ultima domanda. Purtroppo sono col telefono, non so perché quando qualcuno chiama cade la linea. Okay, did you mention possibility to have a bridge between Korean cuisine and Roman and Italian cuisine? In your opinion, what is the best dish or the best recipes that can make this bridge?
I think Korean have a taste for offal, for intestine and heart and all of that. And in Rome, we have a whole tradition of that called the fifth quarter, the quinto quarto.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and so recipes like, I don't know, oxtails and livers, I think those would feel quite familiar to Koreans because in a way, those ingredients are also present in their cuisine. Of course, prepared with different ingredients, with different flavor profile. I think also the pasta dishes would be quite popular because after all, they are simple. There are few ingredients. What counts is the techniques, the skills, and the quality of the ingredients.
Yeah. So in Europe, in my hope, it'll be Rome and Seoul can be twins in some way in developing a fusion cuisine, especially in some field, just to create something common and acceptable and successful for both these traditions.
I think, considering the popularity of Italian food in South Korea, I am sure that most tourists from South Korea would thoroughly enjoy a Roman cuisine.
Okay, thank you, Fabio. Thank you very much for this overview on the Italian cuisine, the connection with Korean cuisine. We have learned many things about these two topics. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.